I'll tell the world.
Come Together San Diego with Caz Taylor on AM 1210 K-Praise.
I'll tell the world.
And hey, thanks for joining us on Come Together San Diego. You know, I've known this hour's co-host for many years, and you stay away from his forehand on the tennis courts. He's dangerous. And his name is Barry LaForgia. He's the executive director of the International Relief Teams. And, you know, when I first started playing tennis with him, I became aware of the kind of things he does, because he goes, oh, there's a disaster here in this state or in another part of the world, he goes, and we're sending teams out. And the more I got to talk with him, I realized he has, and I'm going to brag on you a little bit, Barry, but he has just such a big heart for reaching out and helping people that he built an actual company tied to that, and it's called the International Relief Teams. And for this hour, Barry, you're going to tell us about what you do, some of your inspiration behind that, but also how you're looking out for areas that have a need, and you're sending San Diego volunteers out to do that. Barry LaForgia.
Nice to be with you, Caz.
Yes.
Real pleasure.
So you've got a great story about how all this inspiration came to pass. Share it with us.
Well, what happened was I went with a church mission group down to the Amazon jungle to build homes.
Yes.
And when I came back there, and I went down there with pretty low motivation. I just wanted a new experience.
Yes.
I wasn't trying to do anything that was
not save the world or anything. Just a little bit of
I just want to see another part of the world and pound nails. And but you know, God touched my heart on the way back, and I felt like, you know, I was practicing law at the time, and I just wondered if there's something more I could do with my life.
Yes.
And over the next period of 2 years in which I was investigating, I wrote away to Intercristo, which was a clearinghouse for Christian ministry up in Seattle. And I got back all this literature from all these different organizations. And there was one that really appealed to me called Northwest Medical Teams.
Oh, my.
And but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I threw everything into the drawer, and about 6 months later, I get a call from the president of Northwest Medical Teams, the one organization I was attached. I was attracted to.
Yes.
And he Ron Post, who was the founder of Northwest Medical Teams, he says, I want to know why a guy with a law degree and 2 master's degree wants to do this work. And immediately I go, I'm not sure I want to do anything, Mr. Post. You know, I kind of said, like, back off, buddy. You know. But anyway, I went with Ron down to. He took me the next summer. We went down to see the project in the dumps of Mexico City, and we walked the dumps, and it broke my heart. We saw generations of families just going through the garbage. They brought the garbage in every day, and they used to go through the recyclables, and then they go to the front of the dump where a Jefe was, and they sell, and that's how they lived. They could buy tortillas or whatever they did, but they slept and ate in that dump, and it broke my heart. And one of the first things we did when we founded Southwest Medical Teams, which is what we were called originally, is we sent teams down to build a shower for those people living in the dump so they can clean the dirt off them.
Oh, my.
And then we built a medical clinic for them where they can get some level of medical care.
My. And you know something, having a heart like you do for finding out where disasters are and sending teams to help. Now, when I say the word help, it means a lot of different things to you. I mean, it could be a real simple help, or it could be a medical related stuff, or actually building homes. Give me an overview of what help really means to you.
We kind of look at it, IRT, we kind of look at it as 3 stages to a disaster. The first stage is the acute stage. It's the shortest stage. It's like after an earthquake or a hurricane or something like that. It's a very short stage in which you're trying to save lives, and it might involve rushing in emergency supplies. It might be sending in an emergency medical
teams, including doctors and nurses and the whole people that have that skill set.
Exactly. And then you come to what I call the intermediate stage, and what we refer to there is that now you have survivors, but they're displaced.
Yeah,
they can't go back into their homes.
They're all disassociated from things. Maybe their jobs no more, or their fields that they used to harvest.
Exactly. And so what you have to do is sustain them, and that could involve, temporary lodging like tents and tarps and sleeping bags, cooking utensils, food, water. You're sustaining a displaced population. Then you get into the recovery stage. And the recovery stage, that's the third stage. That's the longest stage. I mean, we worked for 6.5 years on the Mississippi coast after Katrina, rebuilding homes and that's the stage in which you're trying to get people back into permanent shelter and people back into their jobs.
Yes. But Barry, this is absolutely amazing, and here's what our mentality sometimes is: solve the immediate problem and then forget it. And that's a danger, because it leaves so much undone, and people can be not only disillusioned, but there's major dangers to just leaving a person right there thinking that you've done everything necessary.
Well, and a lot of the time that's the perception of the public, because a lot of our news is media driven on these disasters, and once the media stops covering it, people think the problem is solved, and usually it's just the beginning of the solution.
Can anybody say New Orleans?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true in the United States. And while the United States has a lot of ministry-related things and people that have volunteered their time, when you talk about other areas and distant parts of the globe, probably the numbers decrease, would you say?
Absolutely. And we try, when we're not responding to disasters, we do a lot of other work throughout the world.
Yes.
We have a major program in which we supply medicines to hospitals and clinics serving the poor. We send over $30 million a year to help them. We also have right here in San Diego, we have a Feeding San Diego Kids program in which we are working with 4 elementary schools to provide food for the weekends for the family. Yes. And because, they get the federally mandated meal during the day, these kids, but the low-income kids, but they don't get anything for the weekend.
So it sounds like to me that you have a number of different things. You're doing a lot of different things, but the volunteers are many different levels. I mean, you would like to have people that have medical experience volunteer to go out and help with that. How about just people that, like when you were first gone out there pounding nails or just doing some helps kind of thing? What are your needs?
We have a great program right across the border in Tijuana where we build a home in one day.
Oh, really?
We go down on Saturday. And a lot of the churches come
together on that.
Yeah, on that.
Come together, San Diego, maybe?
Exactly.
I like it.
Like the way I tied that in. And so what they do is we go down, and you don't have any skills to be involved in that team.
That's right.
Because we have 4 lead construction people that help direct the people in the church, and we have.
So are you saying that you could use volunteers?
Absolutely.
Well, I know the people in San Diego, some of my believing friends, they go, is there a need somewhere? Let me participate in that. Just quickly give a website or a way that people can find out more about that.
www.irteams.org. You go on the website and you can fill out a volunteer application.
Say that again slowly, Barry.
www.irteams.org.
IRteams.org. And they can find out more about this. We've got about a minute left in this segment, Barry, and I told you it goes fast. And not only is Barry here with us and the executive director of International Relief Teams, but he's got some peeps who have been volunteers, and they are an intricate part of what God is doing and in doing in this. And I say God is doing, and I want you to know that this is an outreach that not only includes Christians, but anybody who has a heart for humanitarian purposes.
That's correct.
So that's wonderful. So in the next segment, we're going to be bringing one of these people on, and I might just use the next segment to brag on you a little bit, because I know some things about you that I just discovered, and you can't get away from me. You can't get away from me except on the tennis courts. You can pass me with that driving shot down the line. Barry LaForgia. We're going to be right back in a moment when we bring Barry back. He's going to bring some volunteers back to give some insights about what's going on. Isn't it amazing how the people have inspiration to go out and do things and change lives? I think that's a God thing, whether they know it or not. We'll be right back with Come Together San Diego to talk more about that. So do not go away.
More Come Together San Diego with Caz Taylor is next on AM 1210 K-Praise. Now, more of Come Together San Diego, the new live local show on K-Praise. Here's Caz Taylor.
And we're back. And oh, what a fun time I'm having on this show. I'll tell you what, when you get people as inspirational as Barry LaForgia, he's quite a guy, and I always loved the guy from first meeting him. I've seen that there's a major character thing going on with him. He's the executive director of International Relief Teams, and he doesn't talk about it so much, but he just goes out and does it. And I'm going to brag on you just a minute, because we're going to bring a person on that can shares the love for you, because she's a person who's been involved with you in the past. But Barry was identified and his company, the International Relief Teams, as Barry as the Citizen of the Year by the City Club of San Diego, Man of the Year by the St. Thomas More Society of San Diego, and one of San Diego Magazine's People to Watch. Are you kidding me? I don't think I've ever seen him wear a watch. No, he does. Barry, hey, that's amazing. And I'm sorry about bragging on you, but I think highly of you. But here's the deal. A person's lifestyle talks a lot about whom they serve and their heart cry for serving others. So I give you high regard for that, Barry. So what are you going to do with that now that I've complimented you?
Well, I've turned red. That's what I've done.
I like it. And good thing this is radio.
Yes, absolutely.
But if it were print, you would be well read. You've got somebody, we have someone on the line who's a friend of yours who has been a volunteer. Why don't you introduce her and we'll have a conversation without my corny jokes?
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Mary Robinson to our listeners. Mary and I used to sing in a folk group out in Ocean Beach together at a church folk group, and that's where I met Mary first. And then when I started IRT, Mary came alongside of me at first and provided administrative support and helped me get the organization off the ground. She was one of our first volunteers that went into the Yucatan right after Hurricane Gilbert hit Cancun. And all the workers who lived around the hotels had no jobs. They had no place to stay. And so what we were doing was building temporary lodging in the jungle, right, so that these people would have a place to live. And Mary was on that first team. She's been on our cleft lip, cleft palate team to Oaxaca. She helps out in the Feeding San Diego Kids program. And she's lastly was on 2 I teams, one to Mexico and one to Guatemala.
Let's just not talk about her. Let's bring her on the air.
Mary, are you there?
Good to have you with us.
Fine. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And Caz, I also know about Barry's wicked forehand on the court.
Ooh, it is really.
Mary's a tennis player.
I've taken a punishing game or two. With
but the only
Barry
problem
on
is
the
he doesn't understand that those white things are lines, and when you go on the other side of the white thing, it's actually out. But he's a man who doesn't take seriously some of the lines that are drawn by our own mental limitations on where we can go and what we can do. He actually erases those lines, and he invites his volunteers. You like how I segued into that?
I do like that.
He erases those lines, and he encourages others, like volunteers like you, Mary Robinson, to get involved in things that may have been a little bit out of your comfort zone, but you jumped on in. Talk a little bit about that and your experience.
You know, it truly was life-changing. I've been a churchgoer and a believer all my life, but somehow when you get into the trenches with these poor people out in the jungle, out there in Cancun and Isla Mujeres, they have nothing, and yet they are so grateful and gracious.
Yes.
Smiles on their faces and handing us the nails and the corrugated tar paper, helping us. It was so heartwarming. I really finished there changed.
Yes.
But I do think the Oaxaca trip was even more touching, having these families travel by foot for 3 days at a time. And, you know, they don't just bring the one child with the cleft palate. They have all their kids with them. And how they managed to make that trek into the city to come to our little clinic where, you know, we pretty much just had a bucket there as a bathroom. It was bare bones.
My. And how did these people find out about it? I guess maybe that's obvious. The word that there's a medical help probably travels fast at that point, doesn't it?
Word of mouth.
Yes.
Exactly. And you tell them when they leave, they go, when you get back to your village, you tell someone else.
Yes.
Send the kids with the cleft palates and the cleft lips.
Oh, my.
There was one gentleman that I met, Ishmael. He was 46 years old, and he had a very wide expanse across his lip, almost 2 inches.
My.
And yet he lived his whole life. He married. He had 6 children. He had work. He looked healthy. It was wonderful to see him humble himself and come there for help the way he did. We had another woman, Juana Mendez, who was 32. She did not have a cleft palate. What happened with her, she stood too close to a fire when she was 5 years old and her dress caught on fire.
Right.
She tried to take the dress off over her head and in the process burned her abdomen, her chest, her shoulders, her neck, and her chin.
My.
And now, here she is 32, her neck was so constricted from the scar tissue, she couldn't turn her head up or down or side to side. So they did a Z-plasty in order to give her that flexibility. It was really phenomenal to see what kind of injuries people would come up with because they had no medical care.
Yes, Mary. I'm going to have Barry do some color commentary on this, but also, isn't it kind of fulfilling that you know sometimes one sits at home and they go, "I wish I could do something." And if they only knew that you don't have to have major skills. Of course, you're skilled at people. I can just tell by the way you talk. You're skilled at dealing with people. But some people may think that they just have no skill sets. But it's amazing what just a willing heart can do. And Barry, you want to talk about that and give Mary some more things to talk about?
Well, in our organization, we have people who come from all different backgrounds.
Yes.
Some are motivated through their a strong faith commitment.
Yes.
Some are motivated just out of humanitarian concern. And there's some who just want a new experience in life and go to
like you pounding nails.
Like I did when I first went down to the Amazon jungle. And but it's amazing the transforming aspect that comes about. I find that even if people are not motivated by religious conviction and what they do, like Matthew 25, you know, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I find that people who volunteer with us, they become more attuned and sensitive to the needs of others.
Wow.
And their life turns around. I always tell young people, I said, if you really want to find yourself, don't start this introspection. Go do something in service of others, and you'll find yourself.
Find yourself by giving your life away, and then you'll find who you are. Mary, you want to talk about that briefly? You sound like a woman who has some depth. So depth of character. So lay it on us.
Thank you so much. Yes, I have to say, life has been tough, and we've all had our struggles to bear. I was diagnosed with level 4 melanoma as a young girl. I was just newly married. I was 29 years old, and they told me, "Gee, we got to do surgery." And because of this melanoma, with a high estrogen level, if you were to become pregnant, you should never have children.
My.
And I was so devastated. Thank God, everything turned out fine. They did the wide excision. I didn't need radiation or anything. But they said, well, if you're going to get pregnant, you should wait 5 years. Well, we waited 3 years, had a beautiful girl. She's 32 now.
My.
And I have that grateful heart. It just is overflowing with gratitude and love. And, you just got to share it.
And, it reminds me of a scripture. I'm sorry, because your name is Mary, but a merry heart does good like a medicine. Oh, I wonder if that scripture was written to you. So, Mary Robinson, we really appreciate this. And Barry, any other color commentary as Mary is here for a minute or two more?
No, you know what, Mary, I just really appreciate you coming on the show and to share your story. You've been an inspiration to all of us at IRT. You're probably our longest volunteer, and the fact that you're still volunteering and still helping out on a weekly basis says a lot about who you are.
Yes.
Well, that's it. See, I can never stop.
I know, it's addicting.
Telling me I'm the oldest, longest running volunteer, so how could I ever stop?
I know.
That is one thing about Barry. He's really, really, really hard to say no to.
I like that. And he is, and that's one of the things that drew me to him as well, as a guy. He's a very gracious guy. And so,
yes, he is. He is a man of God and a man of his word. Truly.
Well, can't get better than that. So, Barry, what do you hang on? He's having trouble getting the headsets on because his head has grown pretty tremendously.
Mary, I'm going to put you in charge of my fan club. This is amazing.
But Barry, I think this is a good time. And Mary, thank you so much for joining us on this segment. You're an inspiration.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Barry, while we have a moment or two left, why don't you give the website information and how people, there are other people that are going like you. I can pound a nail. I can go along and help. And tell us how people can find out more about that.
Well, if they go to our website, www.irteams.org, you can find out a lot about our programs, the stuff that we do during disaster, and a lot of our work during non-disasters.
Yes.
And get involved with us. It would be great. There are some very good opportunities for people, and you don't have to be medical to be involved with us.
That's right. And also, I would be neglectful if I didn't mention this. You function off of people, the benevolence of people making funds available to you as well. Can they find out more information about making funds available from that same website?
Absolutely.
Well, why don't you give it to us again?
Okay. www.irteams.org.
And it's IR, as in International Relief Teams. So it's irteams.org.
That's correct.
And funding is always nice to do too.
Absolutely.
And if you have special skill sets, it's nice to know as well.
Well, one of the things about IRT is that we have been a 4-star charity as rated by Charity Navigator, and we've had that for 14 years, and we're the only San Diego charity that has had the 4-star rating by Charity Navigator for 14 years.
Barry LaForgia. I appreciate that. I hope this hour, my listening friend, is very, very inspiring to you. It has been for me. But all of a sudden, you're starting to realize that you're not just called to sit at home and wonder. You're called to do stuff with the right heart. And I have a suspicion many of the people that are listening to the show have the right heart stuff, but they just didn't have an avenue. So maybe this is an avenue. Maybe there's other things as well. But I hope this has been an inspiration to you. We're going to continue this show, and Barry's going to give you some more insights about this outreach that he does, and some other people that have been impacted. Here's what happens. You think you're going to go impact other people, but all of a sudden you get impacted yourself.
Absolutely. That has been the recurring thing. All our volunteers say they go down expecting to give of themselves, and they get back more than they ever gave.
That's a good place to do a commercial break, because we'll be right back to talk more about that on Come Together San Diego.
This is Come Together San Diego, the new live local show on AM 1210 K-Praise. More Come Together San Diego is just moments away. Now, more of Come Together San Diego on K-Praise. Here's Caz Taylor.
The church is comprised of a lot of different kinds of people. There are those who have a sensitivity of being wise investors and can actually fund things. And then there are people that go, money isn't really what drives my heart. It is going out and helping people. And, sometimes those are some of the wealthiest people spiritually that are out there. And one of the things I've seen from you and the people, Barry LaForgia, who work with you, they're wealthy people, whether they're financially wealthy or not, because they have a richness not only of experience, but a richness in going out and helping people. So this is a person who has a richness in going out and helping people. Why don't you introduce our next call-in guest?
Yes, I'd like to introduce everyone to Therese Reimer. Therese is a family nurse practitioner, and she has been involved with us since 1999, when she was one of our volunteers that went to help out in the aftermath of the Kosovo refugee crisis.
Wow. Therese Reimer, are you there?
I am. Good evening, guys.
Good evening. Now here's what's going to happen. I'm going to share some medical terms with you, and you can be impressed. Orbicularis oris, mandible, phalanges, carpals, metacarpals, tarsals, metatarsals. There you go. That's pretty much the extent of my medical experience as an RN, a family nurse practitioner. You have some skill sets, and you have been so kind to make those skill sets available through international relief teams. And Barry has a couple of questions he wants to ask of you, and I'll kind of step back and throw a medical term here and there.
Well,
Okay.
Therese, you've been involved with us both with your nursing skills, and then as an administrator, most recently when you basically became in charge of our Vietnam medical training program to help lower neonatal and infant mortality throughout the whole country on our nationwide training program in neonatal resuscitation and infant stabilization. But of all your experiences, because I know you worked when we did our program with the U.S. Navy on the Mercy, I know you worked in the Solomon Islands, Cambodia, and Papua New Guinea, and then in Indonesia when you were there right after the earthquake, the subsequent earthquake after the tsunami on Nias Island. Tell me, what experience was your most special to you, and why?
Good question, Barry.
Well, actually, there were probably two that I can tell you about. The first was probably Kosovo, Barry, because into an area that had been war-torn that people were really struggling, that there had been such a limitation on assets and medical care for so long. And then on top of that, the entire political milieu, the number of nations that were trying to get in there at the time to help. It was a really amazing experience, especially working with the local doctors, the local nurses, the dentists that were there that were hungry for information, who had minimal supplies, and we were able to bring that to bear and work with them. It made a difference.
Therese Reimer.
After we left.
Therese Reimer, what were your thoughts on the first endeavor you did? Did you feel like I have qualifications, but I'm not sure whether I can actually handle this? What was the anxiety level, and how was that appeased when you got among the people? Because when you get among people who say, they just really are looking at you and adoringly saying, "Help me," it changes your whole perspective.
Well, it changes your perspective, but I think what it really gets down to is you have to be really flexible about what you're going to do and what the need is.
Oh, yes.
So there were periods of time that I was involved with medical supplies, with setting up a central service, with moving equipment, which were different than what I might have done in a family practice, nurse practitioner position. And other times that I was teaching, other times that I was bringing equipment and wheelchairs out to a small family that had absolutely nothing. I recall, for example, they had a 10-year-old little girl who could not walk. She'd been carried by her father, who was, for her entire life, he carried her to school, he brought her home, he carried her everywhere, and he was a small, slight man and elder at this point. But we were able to just get her something as simple as a wheelchair that made a huge difference for this child to have in her future. Little things like that along the way, shared need with the community, that's what makes a big difference. And if you work side by side with the people in need and the local authorities there, you can get a lot done. It's things that will impact them later.
Yes.
Not just the acute thing, not just the acute issue right now.
Therese, you've done a lot of things with us. Where does your motivation come from?
Ooh, great question, Barry.
Well, Barry, I've been tremendously blessed my entire life with people who have helped me along the way with one thing or another. And it really astounds me if you think about how fortunate we are. I live in San Diego. I'm not struggling, all of the good things. I have family, I have friends. And then you're in other parts of the world or in our own country where there's some disaster, and you realize how easily it could have been you or those that you love.
Oh my.
We are blessed, and if we just share that with each other, and that's the issue. In the middle of a disaster or in any of these humanitarian aid circumstances, I find that people really work together, and they do it as a team. It's not any individual who is making the headway. It's a group effort. But it's spontaneous, and people put their best foot forward, and
Yes.
It includes those that are impacted.
Boy.
I think that's very powerful.
And you say spontaneous. It's easier to be spontaneous and do good when you have a skill set rather than when you don't know what you're doing. And you have a skill set, and being spontaneous within having the knowledge and understanding and being spontaneous, that can go a long way, can't it?
Well, it does. I'm fortunate to have a skill set, but I can tell you in many circumstances like this, I was sometimes doing the kinds of work that I didn't have a background for, but common sense and looking at the circumstances, you realize, well, gee, this is what we got to do next.
Wow.
This is the next step.
Barry, you want to speak to that too a little bit?
People do that.
Yes, it's true. We adapt. We always say to our team members, be flexible.
Yes.
Because things in the field can be different than
Yes.
what you anticipate going in.
Hey, wait a minute. That's kind of like life, isn't it?
Yes, that's true. It is like life, but it's even more important when you're in a disaster zone
Yes.
with limited resources that you have to be flexible and adapt to the situation so you can do the most good.
Yes.
And I'll say this about Therese. Therese has amazing not only clinical skills, but she has amazing administrative skills, and that's why she led our teams to Vietnam. And,
My.
And she's an amazing woman.
Yes. Now,
thank you,
Therese, you've volunteered to do these kind of things. What would you say to a person who's just noodling the idea, just thinking about it? What's the, I know Barry isn't paying $1 billion. I don't think that's the case. It's a volunteer kind of a thing. But what's the payoff? What's the payoff? I know that money isn't the issue here. It's a volunteer effort. But what's the pay? I mean, a lot of people go, I want to do something that here's the phrase. I want to do something that enriches me. So talk a little bit about how you can be enriched by volunteering to do some things that other people may not have considered doing.
Well, I would tell people if your motivation is to enrich yourself while you're enriching the situation or you're enriching other people,
yes,
you actually got a tremendous growth for yourself.
Right.
There's no way that you can come back from these circumstances that we've experienced with IRT. There is no way that you can come back unchanged.
Right.
There is information that you can share with others. It's you have a different view of the world, frankly, and you can share that easily. The skill set that people go with is expanded. It cannot be expanded. You cannot come back without that expansion. It's automatic to the circumstances and the situation.
Therese Reimer.
It's a blessed situation,
yes,
and I would encourage anybody who would be interested to give it a go.
Wow. Thank you for your inspiration, Therese. You are an inspiration, and you're a person, it looks to me like you're a person who rolls up their sleeves and puts their hand to the task. So we are really honored to have you here on the show. And Barry, we have to wind this up for the next segment, but any parting thought?
Well, just want to thank you so much, Therese, for coming on board. We value you as just a tremendous asset in our organization, and thank you for all your volunteerism and your support and your kindness to me.
Therese Reimer, RN.
It's been my honor. Thank you.
Yes. Family nurse practitioner, has taken her skill sets and she's making them available to see how they can be used inspirationally. And what she gives out doesn't even compare to what she receives back in the heart and in the life. And these are memories that we just won't forget. So, Barry,
Absolutely.
We're going to go to. Thank you so much for joining us, Therese. We're honored to have you.
Thank you, Therese.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So Barry, we're going to go into the next segment now, but I tell you, my listening friends, there are a lot of things that have been going on in your mind and heart right now, and we're going to explore them even further in this next segment. And I may even, actually what I'm going to do also is I'm going to open up the phone lines for this last segment, and if you want to talk to Barry, you're welcome to do that too. We have another phone call guest coming in, but you're welcome to call. Let me give you the number, 1-866-K-PRAISE, 1-866-K-PRAISE. You can call in the last segment as well. And we're going to be right back. And I think you're going to be thrilled because what we're speaking with our mouths is really touching your heart. This is Come Together San Diego, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Come Together San Diego, the new live local show on AM 1210 K-Praise. Don't just listen to it, be a part of it at 866-577-2473. You're just moments away from more Come Together San Diego on K-Praise. Come Together San Diego with Caz Taylor on AM 1210 K-Praise.
Boy, this show is taking on its own character. A lot of the shows we do are talking about in the church environment or Christians that are doing different things like that. But this is really putting the pedal to the metal, Barry LaForgia. I tell you what, and I love it. I love it. Barry, I think you'll appreciate his background, the executive director of the International Relief Teams. And we've spent this whole hour talking about giving of yourself and becoming spiritually wealthy as a result of that.
Absolutely.
Barry, and we have somebody here. You've talked this guy up like crazy, so we're gonna have fun interviewing him. And Mark, I trust that you're on the line. Before you say too much, Mark, I'm gonna have Barry introduce you more formally. So get ready, because he's talked you up big time. So wear your humble boots.
Mark, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Great. It was really interesting, Mark. I went back to look at your volunteer record
And
with us.
Mark's full name?
Mark Grisey.
Mark Grisey. Hello, Mark Grisey.
And Mark, you started out with us way back when Hurricane Floyd hit North Carolina back in 2000. And I was just counting out all the different disasters, U.S. disasters in which you have helped out. And, you went to West Virginia, Houston, Hurricane Isabel, Tropical Storm Allison, Florida hurricanes, Hurricane Katrina, the Alabama tornadoes, Superstorm Sandy. I counted out the number of weeks you gave of yourself to help us, and you almost have a year worth of time. Almost 48 weeks you've put in to help us, Mark, and I'm just blown away by that. By the way, Mark is a contractor a carpenter by trade, yes. And he has great skill sets. And Mark, I'm glad to have you call in and glad to have you part of this program. Really means a lot to us.
I'm very privileged to be a part of this dialogue here.
Tell us.
I didn't realize. Yes.
Just tell us what it looks like when you've got this task in front of you and you've got a skill set. What are you thinking as you go into an environment like this that has some devastation, or you're just doing on a mission to go out and build some houses? What does that look like with you?
Well, unlike a lot of different volunteers, building construction is what I do. Although most of my work is in commercial work, actually I've built more homes in Mississippi and North Carolina that I built in Southern California. It's kind of worked out that way. And so for me, that's easier to me. I'm familiar with it, but we have such a depth of wonderful volunteers, which really, makes all the difference in the world. They're willing to learn. They're willing to do anything. And some of this stuff is real hard, real physical. Mississippi, North Carolina in July, September, it's scorching hot. Got a lot of humidity, and these guys just hang in there, and whatever you want them to do, they do it.
So you're coming back. You're going out to these places that have had some disaster hit, like that could have been a hurricane or flooding. Barry, what's that look like?
Well, when we send our construction teams out, there have been the people that have been affected. Sometimes they've been out of their homes for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Like even in Mississippi, when we were into year 5 and 6, these people were still displaced from their homes. Sometimes they're living in FEMA trailers. Sometimes they're just living with relatives. And so by the time you get down there to work on their home, and the way it works is usually you start out with the homes that you can easily repair,
yes,
because you're trying to get many people back
into their life and lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then as you go further into the recovery phase, you start getting into the harder builds.
Yeah.
And then by the end of our tenure, we're usually doing complete builds.
My.
And so people like Mark, I know that you've experienced this, because I've experienced when I've gone on the teams, is that a lot of these people are pretty depressed, especially if they've been out of their homes for 2 to 3, 4 years.
Well, and when they start, and Mark, when they start seeing the construction happen on their houses, it has to give them a breath of hope. And I understand that you're tied to a church here in San Diego County.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, one of the things you're doing is you're actually ministering with every nail. So talk a little bit about that and how people see that when they see their house being reconstructed.
Well, it's exciting. Your first ministry as a Christian on this team is to your team, but it's really exciting when you see a homeowner, who's been waiting for years. A lady we had built their home in Mississippi. She lived in a tent in the backyard for a year and a half before she ever got a trailer. And this is a tough girl.
No
and
kidding.
But they to go in, because they're bummed. And the government's come in and they assessed some stuff, gave them some money maybe. But a lot of these people were there because they're not insured or grossly uninsured. Thought they had insurance, and it doesn't cover the 100-year flood. And they're so excited. I've had where you open up a door to somebody and say, "Hey, we're from International Relief Team. We're here to work on your house," and they come out of the door and fly out and give you hugs.
Oh my!
And it's a little startling, but they are so happy. When an older gentleman out in the boondocks in Mississippi, that he not only lost his home, but his business, because he was doing, cars, like auto parts and stuff like this.
Yes.
And as all this thing got flooded, It destroyed all his inventory, all his cars, and his home. And so when we came out there to do this stuff that he's not going to get any help, and we helped him with it. Oh, and we left. He had tears in his eyes, and here's this hard guy crying because these people come out and help, and the first question they ask is, so why are you here? Why you come all the way from California to help us? It's, for me, you say, hey, I'm here because God loves you, and this is one of the ways He wants to show that love for you. A lot of people, they look at the storm like, hey, God allowed this to happen, and He did. And it took everything, all their possessions, everything they owned is now gone, went to the dump. And it gives them hope, a hope that God still loves them, to have people come out and help restore their homes. Wow. It's really very powerful, very powerful. I've made friends for life just because I had an opportunity, a privilege to work on their home.
Yes. Mark Grisey, and you're a carpenter, and you're working with Barry and with the international relief teams. I guess you could speak just a little bit about another carpenter who's a good friend of yours. What kind of inspiration do you get from that carpenter to make you be a better carpenter and help people like you do? That's a loaded question, isn't it?
You're talking about Jesus, the master carpenter.
I am indeed.
I would assume. It's, for me, what I do, I love what I do. I've been a carpenter for 45 years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I still do this. And, and I want to represent the Lord when I go there, which means, not everybody in construction, some people in construction use Sunday school language all the time. It's God this and Jesus that, but that's not what they mean.
No.
And you get to be a light. You get to be a salt, like what Jesus told us to be. Not every volunteer, there's motivations or different motivations for why people would come out. Really, the people that I have worked with IRT are really some of the best volunteers ever I've worked with, and they're there to help. And so, but you get to show that, in dealing with conflict or dealing with having people in a hard environment, hard weather, and being able to minister to them, encourage them.
That's amazing, isn't it?
From the way you talk, the words you use.
And the manner in which you deal in business. Mark Grisey, we're really honored to have you and to share your perspective. And Barry, we're running up against the end of the show, but why don't you spend a moment giving contact information, and then I'll close the show down.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mark for coming on the show. Mark, you're an inspiration to all of us, and you're a dear friend. So thank you again. And again, if you want to get involved with international relief teams, www.irteams.org. You can fill out a volunteer application, and we'll be in contact with you.
Very good. Barry LaForgia, I appreciate this. Thank you for coming in and sharing this thought. And my listening friend, I hope this has been an inspiration to you. And we've got more coming up next week from 5 to 7 p.m. on Come Together San Diego. It was a pleasure communicating with you, and I hope this has stirred your heartstrings. And we're honored to be here and sharing what God's doing in San Diego and beyond. And this show has been a bit about the beyond, hasn't it, Barry?
It sure has.
Thanks for joining me. And we will see you next time, my friend, on Come Together San Diego.
Thanks for joining Caz Taylor and his many friends, including you, for Come Together San Diego. Join us again next week as we explore what unity in the body of Christ sounds like within this county and beyond on Come Together San Diego. Tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a coworker, and then let's all come together San Diego next Saturday from 5 to 7 p.m. on AM 1210 K-Praise.